Hello and welcome to the Fandom Portals podcast, where curiosity meets community in a celebration of all things geek. We build connections on every episode by delving into your favorite fandom questions in the time it takes Nicolas Cage to steal the Declaration of Independence. I'm Aaron Davies, your host, and today I am joined by one out of six of the Infinity Bros from the Infinity Bros podcast. It is Isaac Edlund. How are you going today, Isaac?
I'm doing great. I'm very excited to chat with you. I've been listening to some of your previous episodes, and you're doing an awesome job with this podcast. So keep it up. Excited to listen to more.
Thank you so much. And I appreciate you for guesting on it. Your podcast as well is one of the ones in my listenership. You guys do a geekly news podcast. You're an avid movie enthusiast yourself. You have an immaculate letterbox profile as well, which I have gone through the list of to see. Do you want to give us a little bit of a rundown on what your podcast is, just for those people that are tuning in and may not have heard of the Infinity Bros podcast before?
Absolutely. So the Infinity Bros are a group of six guys who, we have a bi-weekly podcast that, like you said, we talk news, pop culture, review films, TV shows, video games, kind of whatever is on our nerdy plate for the week or month or whatever. And we also basically are content creators, I guess. We have a pretty substantial TikTok and Instagram accounts that one of my fellow Infinity Bros uploads daily content to. I try to contribute as much as possible, but as a full-time dad and husband and also having a full-time job, content creation kind of takes a backseat sometimes. So I do love it, but it is lower on my priority list sometimes. But we have a blast just basically doing what we would do offline, but recording it for the internet to listen to. If you tune into one of our podcasts, you basically hear us ripping on each other over their hot takes of pop culture. So that's kind of what our podcast is all about.
That's exactly what friends should do, I reckon, is just,
exactly
talk to each other about the things they love and, combat each other's opinions as well. That's really good.
There's too much positivity among friends sometimes. You just need to tear each other down a little bit to get to know each other better. So
yeah, exactly. To show your love in the correct way, just to see if they really do. I really enjoy listening to your podcast weekly. I know that you recently did an episode that talked about the teaser or the last little part of Deadpool Wolverine, where Gambit had a little bit of a cameo.
Yeah.
And that sort of geek news is just centric around the Infinity Bros podcast. So if you're a person who really wants to keep up with your geek news, make sure you go and check out the Infinity Bros. Isaac is there all the time. You can hear his lovely voice weekly. So this podcast here, what our audience can expect is that we are going to be talking about the tumultuous career and the infamous or famous character of Nicolas Cage. We're going to be talking about Isaac's journey with Nicolas Cage. We're going to be diving into some of his most famous or infamous roles, maybe even creating a little watch list for our audiences, which you can look for at the end of the podcast. We're going to be talking about this guy's unique personality and some of the myths and legends surrounding the character of Nicolas Cage. And we're going to reveal some of Nicolas Cage's upcoming works. So by the end of the podcast, you'll definitely have an appreciation or an upgrade in knowledge, at least, for Mr. Nicolas Cage, and as to why he is probably one of the most hardest working people in all of Hollywood. Isaac, you've been a Nicolas Cage fan for a while.
Yeah, it's been a few years now.
Mm-hmm.
Just give a little bit of background on my start with Nicolas Cage. So my first movie that I ever watched of Nicolas Cage's was National Treasure. That came out when I was probably in high school, formative years. Watched that. Absolutely loved that movie. And to this day remains my overall favorite Nicolas Cage movie. I could just rewatch that one all day long. It's fantastic. But always had a little bit of a just mild fascination with him because he's in so many movies and so many people are so divided on what they think of him. So many people think he's a horrible actor. So many people think he's an amazing actor. He's won an Academy Award. So he definitively is a good actor, but there are plenty of roles that people don't really like or appreciate that he is in because, as we mentioned, he's a very hardworking dude and is in a ton of movies. I always had just this kind of mild fascination. And then I believe it was 2021, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent came out. And this is a movie that Nicolas Cage plays himself, where he goes on an adventure as Nicolas Cage. And with Pedro Pascal, it is It's one of his best movies, honestly. It's so funny. Pedro Pascal and him have hilarious chemistry. And that movie made me realize that I guess I don't really fully appreciate him as an actor, because I thought before that, I was like, oh yeah, he's a good actor. Like, he's not bad. When I saw that, I was like, I feel like I need more context to his career after watching that movie. So I kind of made a little journey or goal for myself to watch all of his movies. And that sounds like massive, ordeal, which it is. So it was just kind of a fun thing that I was like, yeah, I'll try it out. And then it kind of turned into a bigger thing where on our TikTok, our socials, I will review every Nicolas Cage movie that I have seen, just quick reviews, just the basic thoughts on what I thought. And then, like you said, over the past few years, I've been using Letterboxd to kind of track them, and I have a list on Letterboxd. My Letterboxd is the same as like all of my social profiles. It's Isaac Edlund, which we can. I don't want to spell that out for you guys because it's too. We'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah, it'll be in the show notes. Yeah.
So it's been fun to use Letterboxd to track all of those films, and I think on my Nicolas Cage list on Letterboxd right now, I think I have 57 films, if I'm remembering correctly. It's in the higher 50s. I did a count on his IMDb. Full feature films that he is in is at 110 right now. So I'm about halfway on his films list, which, for me, I grew up in a house where we didn't watch much TV or movies at all. So I have this massive gap of we watched a ton of like kids films. Like that was the thing that we did watch a lot of. Disney, I'm like very fluent in. I can quote any Disney movie to you. Like animated films, know them very well. But when it comes to like my film history, like anything prior to like early 2000s, there's a good chance that I have not seen that film. So it's a pretty big gap in my like film history. So watching a lot of these Nicolas Cage films is the first time I've seen any of them. I didn't grow up watching these action movies. That's another big hole that I have in my, viewing history or whatever. And so, yeah, it's been a really fun journey to go through and watch all of his movies. And I mean, to not like, cutting to the chase, I do believe that he is a really good actor. The difference between him and a lot of other actors is that he does not shy away from taking risks in his acting roles. A lot of actors kind of nowadays will play relatively the same character in a lot of their film or roles and stuff like that. But Nicolas Cage, he goes out on a limb and he just goes 110% in every role. Doesn't mean he nails it in every role, and is in so many movies that inevitably at least half of them are probably going to be not so great. So
below that 3-star mark on Letterboxd. Yeah.
There's plenty of those on my list that are below probably 2.5, like 3-star on Letterboxd is where I would say like I would rewatch that movie. Like it's a fun, entertaining movie. You get to 2.5 and lower, that's probably a one-time watch for me. I'm not coming back to that movie.
Or even
have a really good
finish. Or a struggle to finish.
Yeah, that's true. I will say though, I am very generous when it comes to entertainment in general. I'm able to find joy in movies, even if they're bad movies. Like if I can laugh at the bad things, I can still find entertainment out of that movie. And that's where a lot of his roles come in, because a lot of those movies are
I do
hilariously bad.
You can find the sweet spot with Nicolas Cage's movies as well. Like obviously he appeals to you. But you said before in our opening, like you obviously podcast with 5 other people, 6 including yourself. Has there been any conversations or any contention between yourself and your other castmates about how you perceive Nicolas Cage? Is there any sort of defining personalities or perspectives that are completely opposite? Because Nicolas Cage can either be seen as someone who is vastly loved and appreciated for his talent, or somebody who just seems like a meme-worthy actor that appears primarily on social media feeds.
Yeah, I think the great thing about having 6 hosts or co-hosts is that we get a very wide variety of opinions. And a lot of times that comes out on the podcast, which is kind of why it's fun to podcast with all these guys are all good college friends that we all, have been friends for years before even starting the Infinity Bros podcast. So, you know what? Like, everybody on all of my co-hosts know that I have this like mild obsession with Nicolas Cage. So they all are 100% all in on that. I would say they're all like appreciative of him as an actor. They definitely have movies that they like with him in it. I don't think there's any of them off the top of my head that does not actively does not like Nicolas Cage. So, so I'd say it's a pretty good, like when I start talking Nicolas Cage, they just like kind of smile and laugh and
Isaac's doing his thing.
Roll their eyes a little bit, maybe. Exactly.
No, that's really good. You talked before about your first experience with Nicolas Cage, which was the movie National Treasure. Mine was as well. So I saw National Treasure in the movies at the end of high school. It was like one of our reward day things. And we went, I had no idea what the movie was. Sat in that feature film, watched Nicolas Cage. I'd heard of Nicolas Cage before, but watching him in that movie, he just played just this awesome character of Benjamin Gates. And then the soundtrack coupled with that movie towards the end, I still remember the moment where the treasure was revealed after all that hard work, the soundtrack that hit. It was probably like, I've felt goosebumps in a cinema before, but in National Treasure with Nicolas Cage, that is one that goes on my list as feeling goosebumps as to a moment in cinema. Speaking of, has there been any roles that Nicolas Cage has done, or any of the movies that you've sort of been watching starring Nicolas Cage, that has left like a lasting impression on you or has taken you by surprise?
Nicolas Cage has won an Oscar. He won an Academy Award for his leading role in Leaving Las Vegas, which is like a drama, like a romance, like drama, I guess. And I remember watching that movie. This was in my like watch, journey, watching that movie. And I was like, that really doesn't stand out to me as Oscar winning role. Like it was good. It was fine. But there are so many more roles that he's had in his career that to me are more definitive and better roles in general as an actor for him. So I found that fascinating. And I did actually look at the lineup for that. And I had not heard of almost any of the movies that were also in contention for like best picture and, leading actor and stuff. So that's probably part of it. But at the same time, it's like, I mean, dude's got some other underrated roles, by the way. I think the one that stuck out to me in recent years is Pig. And that's a very, very intriguing movie. That's like, I guess I would describe it as almost like John Wick-ish.
Yeah.
In a more mentally intriguing way. Like John Wick is awesome. Like it's fantastic, but you watch John Wick for the action, right? So Pig is the story of Nicolas Cage as a former chef who has this pig that gets stolen. And he's on this journey to go rescue a pig. And he's going to do that no matter what the cost.
That's so good.
Wow. Dude, there's a clip where he is basically, not reminiscing isn't the right word. He gets faced with a former chef from his past. And it is one of the best acting clips that I have ever seen him do. It is a phenomenal scene. And this is one, if you're looking for kind of a off the grid, like, out of the box type of good Nicolas Cage performance, this is the one that you want to see. So that's just the scope of his. And then immediately before that, the same year, he does Willy's Wonderland, which is basically a ripoff of Five Nights at Freddy's, where he murders a bunch of animatronic animals and he doesn't say one word the whole movie. He does not have a line. So just the range of acting that he does is just, it's wild. So that's what intrigues me about him. And again, some of those roles aren't that good. I personally love Willy's Wonderland because it's hilarious. But a lot of people would probably watch that and be like, what the heck am I watching? Like, what is this?
I think it goes back to that thing where there's a flavor of Nicolas Cage for everybody. And I haven't personally seen Pig, but I have seen him talk about it in interviews where he says that that's one of the favorite movies
that's one of his favorite movies that he's ever acted in. So
and he also says that it's sort of like this poem about grief and loss, and there's sort of nuance within the character. And I feel like he brings that nuance to a lot of his different roles, even if it is kind of like a simple or not so serious role, because he does take his work as a thespian, as he calls it, quite seriously, to the point where I was reading some information about Con Air, for example, and he personally like spoke to the director about how he thinks that Nicolas Cage should be the character in that he plays should be a Southern sort of man with an accent from Alabama, because notoriously or famously, those sort of people have a really strong affinity for like justice and also like taking care of the chivalrousness of ladies, that kind of thing. So he kind of really thinks deep about his character choices and his characters in that way. So even like a high-end action flick like Con Air, he's sort of thinking about where his character is at and what sort of way he can approach his character from. Now, speaking about the roles that he actually accepts, I haven't really seen much about what sort of draws him, do you know, to a character? What sort of draws him to a movie? Because as you said, he does make some interesting choices in terms of risk, in terms of movie that he puts onto his filmography.
So there is a little bit of a story behind why he started churning out movies so much it was probably around the mid 2000s, maybe. Like since then, he's almost made 6 movies per year.
That is incredible.
It's insane. Like most actors nowadays barely do 1 a year because it's such a huge commitment, because you're filming for months, at a time for these big, blockbuster films and stuff like that. So the fact that he can, do 5 or 6 in 1 year is just incredible. So the reason why he started doing that is actually because he got in really deep financial trouble and he did not want to file for bankruptcy. So he basically was like, I'm going to work myself out of this. And he basically took pretty much any role that he could until he, kind of gained back his financial state that he had previously. So pretty cool story. Also a little bit of a cautionary tale, I guess, of hey, maybe, be smarter about your
be financially savvy.
Yeah,
exactly. But also, it just shows that's a really endearing quality. It's so easy for people to give up in a situation like that. But he literally worked his butt off in the film industry to get back to status zero, you might say. And you know what? Now he's regarded as one of Hollywood's hardest working actors, and he's got a filmography that just really shows his length and breadth of talent. It's just, it's interesting to see how far he's come and the different sort of phases of Nicolas Cage, you might say as well. Because I know we did some commenting on our Threads account here at Fandom Portals, and I asked everybody what their go-to Nicolas Cage film was. So I think right now, Isaac, we're going to have some time where we can sort of discuss some of our favorite Nicolas Cage films, or maybe curate a list for our listeners as to what they should divulge their time into if they're going to take this journey. So our Threads account was pretty vocal when we put this one out. And the 3 movies that came up for the Threads community, the first one was obviously Gone in 60 Seconds, probably, apart from National Treasure, one of his more famous roles. The second one was Con Air and Face Off. Those 2 were really sort of prevalent as well. But the other one that surprised me was Raising Arizona. That was one that I had never seen before. But out of I watched 5 movies in preparation for this interview with you today. And the one that I loved the most out of all 5 of those was Raising Arizona. So have you had Raising Arizona on your list? What are your thoughts on his character?
I have. And that was also a surprise for me, because I did not expect it. For a little bit of context, Raising Arizona is one of his earlier movies. I believe it is 1987? 87.
Yeah, it's 87, yeah.
And at this point, Nicolas Cage is known for his dramatic roles. Moonstruck was kind of one of his big ones that got him on the map. And, these dramatic, romantic roles. So him doing a comedy was a little bit outside the box for him at this point in his career. And to me, I've heard people talk about it and stuff like that, had no clue what the context of this movie is going into it. And I was pleasantly blown away by this movie. I also thought it was phenomenal. I have it at number 6 on my all-time Nicolas Cage list. So it almost made the top 5. It's a great movie. And he just has this great comedic timing with, just a great quirky Nicolas Cage role. You're almost laughing at his character more than anything else that happens in this film. But yeah, the great performances all around. I mean, John Goodman is
he plays Gale. Yep.
Yeah, one of the bad guys, and it's great. It's just a really fun film.
Yeah, I think it's like this screwball Looney Tunes like comedy that sort of was out of the box for Nicolas Cage at the time. But the thing that drew me to this movie and what put it above the rest from the 5 that I watched was like the character that he plays, H.I. He's always got these really good intentions, and they just seem to just not work out for him. Like he almost seems like people pleaser like in his role, where he's trying to keep his wife happy, he's trying to keep his prison buddies happy, he's trying to do what's best for everybody. And then also when he actually finds the baby and he steals the baby, Nathan Jr., because he and his wife obviously can't conceive a child naturally. You know, he does that. And then the pressures of fatherhood kind of get to him as well, where he goes through that moment where he actually has to get a job. He has to work a 9 to 5. And then when his prison buddies sort of come back and say, we've got this massive score, he considers that for a moment. And that kind of commitment to him being this sort of father figure where he had absolutely no issues before about, you know, going into a convenience store and frequently being a jailbird in and out. It was just really compelling to see that character change from where he was at the start of the film to where he ended up being, where he gave the baby back. He would have absolutely sort of faced jail time for it. And he said, you know, it's all my fault. And even in the end, he was trying to take that blame from his wife as well. So that sort of self-sacrificing character, but also just the transition in this comedic movie was just, it was amazing for me to watch. And I think that all comes from Nicolas Cage's performance, but obviously the incredible script writing that was from Raising Arizona. And it came at a time as well, like, as you said, Moonstruck came out the exact same year, which was a dramatic role. And then shortly after that, he played Peter Leo in Vampire's Kiss, which came out in 1988, which is completely different again. That's like psychological and not screwball comedy at all. It is absolutely almost the opposite. So what are some other movies that you have on your list as Nicolas Cage's top standout ones that you would recommend? Obviously, our Threads community said those ones, Raising Arizona being one. I think Raising Arizona for me would be like top 3 for me. So what about yourself? What else is on your list?
All right, let's see here. So I already mentioned Willy's Wonderland. That's a great B-roll like horror film. If you're into those, if you're a horror fan, I feel like you will appreciate that. But it's like got the Nicolas Cage like flair on it, and he's been doing a ton of.
He's been diving into horror, yeah,
horror and like kind of B film type stuff lately, and that's his top one in my opinion. I absolutely love that movie. I think one of the most famous roles that he plays or movies that he's in is The Rock as well, with Sean Connery, where he is, you know, Sean Connery is the ex-convict that is helping them with a hostage situation on Alcatraz.
Yep.
Just the chemistry between Sean Connery and Nicolas Cage in that one is great. And Nicolas Cage, this is another thing that fascinates me about him. In almost every movie that he's in, he plays like kind of the straight man. Like he's not the overly funny guy. He's kind of just the guy that's there. And then he obviously has those moments where he gets to show kind of the famous, you know, Cage rage.
Yeah.
Where you know, those are the meme clips, you know, from Vampire's Kiss and all those different films that he just has his crazy eyes on and he's going nuts. But he gets a few of those moments, but most of the time, I mean, the focus is on Sean Connery and what he's doing, and Nicolas Cage I think he just shines in that like kind of co-star role. Whereas a lot of his films, he pretty much is the star because, you know, he's Nicolas Cage. So
yeah, exactly.
That's a great one. I think Face Off is one. It's not really on my top 5, but that's one that if you're going on a Nicolas Cage watch, that is absolutely essential.
I agree.
The fact that he and John Travolta are like so tuned into each other's acting and like personalities and stuff, that's an actually like incredible like filmmaking masterpiece, I think, even though it is ridiculous. It's crazy. You get the slow-mo jumping while shooting in the air, you know,
over the countertop where things are smashing, like glass is shattered. Yes, it's just full action, just comedy, not comedy, but like slapstick almost in its premise and its action scenes. And I do agree, like the acting in that, it could have come off so much more of a parody than it actually did. And I think that the reason it didn't was because Travolta and Cage put so much effort into getting to know each other's styles. Like I read somewhere that they spent 2 weeks just sort of living bunkered down together so they could get like 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 cues that they could run off of. Because sometimes when you're watching a scene with Nicolas Cage, you're watching Nicolas Cage play his character, but then he's also playing his character pretending to be John Travolta's character who is also then pretending to be Nicolas Cage's character. Like, it's just that level of acting. Prowess.
It's real like meta before meta was really a thing. It's pretty incredible. So that's definitely one that I would recommend. One also underrated one that I did not expect to be on like top of my list is Matchstick Men. That's a Ridley Scott directed film where he plays basically a con man, and he and Sam Rockwell are co-star together in it. And it's actually a really, really great movie and underrated. I feel like there's not a lot of people that have heard of it or seen it, but it's definitely up there in his acting roles. And he plays a guy that's got like severe OCD, and it's a perfect role for him. Like he plays that role so well. One of his probably better casted movies, I think. So that's definitely another one to check out if you're like interested in seeing his acting prowess.
Yeah, I feel like he thrives when there is like not a bit, but there is a theme to the character that he's playing, where there's something that he can dive into or something that he can lean against that is so nuanced, as we said, to some of the other roles that he's done. Because even when you're looking at his holy trinity, as some people call it, The Rock, Con Air, and Face Off, you could say that some of the characters that he's playing throughout those three movies can be very similar in their character role, you might say. Like he plays the everyman, or he plays the guy that is there to drive the narrative. But he also kind of does bring that element of there is a uniqueness to this character. And that's sort of subtle as well. And, a lot of actors in action blockbusters, they kind of go like verbose with it. They go boisterous with it, and they try to make their character stand out amongst the rest by having X, Y, Z in their acting repertoire that just really sort of blows the nuance of the character. Whereas Nicolas Cage does it in a more subtle way. For example, like his character in Gone in 60 Seconds, he's a leader there, but he's also so calm in that moment, in those moments there to be that ultimate car thief, but he's also so dedicated to his family and protecting his little brother. And, he's gotten out of the life, but, there's that nuance to his character where he just has that loyalty, that sort of passion for cars. There's just that moments of character depth that I really feel like Nicolas Cage just brings action to any of the movies that he's in. So I think he's definitely really, really talented.
Yeah, I agree. And there's definitely, I'm definitely going to be honest and say there's a lot of roles and a lot of films that he does not nail. And, again, those are ones that I've rated less than 2.5 stars and probably will not be watching again unless I'm watching it in a room full of my Infinity Bros or something, and we can sit and make fun of it. Because that's when it's okay to watch a bad movie, when you've got a bunch of buddies over and you can sit and make fun of the movie.
Absolutely. I think one of those for me that I watched in prep for this was Primal. Have you seen Primal? It's surprisingly okay, but I feel like Nicolas Cage's character in that, he just plays this grumpy old hunter. I feel like that's just how he kind of dove into that role, is just like, I'm going to be grumpy for this. But the actual premise of that movie is it's a really fun group watch. I would think.
The premise of that movie is actually really good. Gets lost a little bit in execution. It's not as good as it promises to be, but honestly, the story was pretty solid. It wasn't that bad. Yeah, Nicolas Cage, that's one of those roles where he grabbed onto something that really, I don't know if it was maybe a little cliche that he was like the grumpy hunter guy, that like, wanted to stay away from people and like was in it for himself. But at the same time, he cared about other people, like a little bit cliche. So that's not one of his defining roles, but that's a perfect example of a movie that you could sit and be like, okay, this is free.
Yeah. And you know what? Just the combination of him being like this grumpy hunter who's being transported on this ship. And then also, some prisoners get put on this ship. But on top of the prisoners being on this ship, there's also all of the deadly animals that he caught. And then all of them get loose at once. Like, it just sounds ridiculous, but it's actually a really, really fun watch, Like, it's not a good movie, but it's a fun watching movie.
It's a fun one.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. That's a way I describe a lot of his movies. They're entertaining. They're fun watches. They're not good movies, but they're fun to watch.
Definitely. So speaking of fun, there has been some awesome, fun stories of Nicolas Cage over the time that really curate his larger-than-life reputation, you might say. There's some interesting myths and legends that, people have either heard of or spoken of or written about in articles about Nicolas Cage that really sort of cement that juxtaposition of him being this actor that's sort of thespian in his way with character acting, but then also off screen, he's kind of extravagant as well. And I've watched an interview with him on Jimmy Kimmel recently where he actually talked about how he turned $200 into $20,000, and it's the only time he ever gambled. He went and he did roulette, and he said that he was feeling on that day, and he kept selecting like various different numbers, ended up changing, this $200 to $20,000. And he thought that the night was so magic. He went to this orphanage, put the $20,000 towards the orphanage, met the madam and everything like that, or the headmistress. And then, he'd never gambled since. And just that's almost like a character out of one of his movies. You could make a movie about just that moment. So have you heard of any myths, legends, interesting stories about Nicolas Cage that you could share with our audience?
Yeah. One of my favorite ones is actually, I mentioned before that he made a string of probably poor financial decisions in his career in the late 90s, early 2000s. And one of those poor financial decisions that he made was buying a Tyrannosaurus Rex skull, like a real one, a dinosaur skull. He doesn't disclose how much he spent on it, but at one point he was worth about $150 million in his career. He, like I said, he went near bankrupt around that time. So, I mean, this skull probably was millions of dollars.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
He ended up having to give it back to the Mongolian government because apparently it was sold illegally.
Oh my gosh.
But, that's like one of those things where you see it on a headline of an article and you're like, is that real? Like,
yeah,
is this satire? I can't tell if this is real life or if this is satire, but that's just Nicolas Cage for you, man. He's almost as much of a quirky, eccentric guy in real life as he is in a lot of his movies.
No, 100%. And, that's spending on various different sort of animals. I've heard as well that, he once had a 2-headed snake that he bought as well. And there's like an incredibly intelligent crow that he owns. Like there's just so much of this sort of slapstick that you just look at it and you're like, is this real? And, when you're looking at that and you're coupling it with some of the movies that he's done where he does play some really nuanced characters, I guess that's where people do get that perception where this guy's just a bit of a joke,
Well, yeah, that along with the memification of a lot of his crazy moments, right? You have those crazy moments in Face Off is another movie that there's probably 2 or 3 very popular GIFs, memes. Vampire's Kiss is another one. Like the only reason people know Vampire's Kiss exists is because of memes today, because the movie is not good. It's not a good movie, but Cage is probably at his most unhinged in that movie. And yeah, like I said, I mean, it doesn't speak to the level of actor that he is, but at the same time, I mean, everybody knows who Nicolas Cage is, even if you don't really appreciate or like him as an actor, you know who he is. He's pretty up there on the list of famous people, or infamous, if you prefer to refer to him as such.
Absolutely. But I think one of his most memed movies in modern culture is, The Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent that we were talking about before, where he stars with Pedro Pascal. Obviously, he plays himself, and Pedro Pascal is this obsessed sort of character. He's obsessed with Nicolas Cage and all of his works, and all he wants is to hang out with Nicolas Cage. And that movie as well is almost like a love letter to all of his movies before. You mentioned before that it was probably one of your favorites. Where does that sit in your Letterboxd list? What are some favorite moments from that movie?
Yep. And like I said before, Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent is what started me on this whole thing, because I was like, I need to understand the context behind this almost memification of Nicolas Cage, and that movie does, and despite being an incredible movie, it really does almost cement him as a memified but it's incredible. It's number 2 on my list. I absolutely love Unbearable Weight of Massive Talent, one of my favorite Nicolas Cage movies of all time.
Yeah, I think especially to the point where there's that scene where he's on the LSD with Pedro Pascal, and there's just the antics that they go through while they're on that sort of hallucinogenic intoxicant is just...
Yeah, when this movie came out and that clip got memed, it's the one where Nicolas Cage looks over at Pedro Pascal and he just looks growly, like nasty, and Pedro Pascal's just smiling and laughing. And it's like that was the source of so many memes at that time. It was absolutely love that moment.
I agree. I think that was what sort of got me to, because of all those memes, it got me to watch that movie. So, and then they coupled it with that perfect song that was just, they built it there. People are so creative. I love it.
Yeah.
All right. So we've talked a lot about Nicolas Cage, but let's talk about what he is doing in the future. So are there any projects from Nicolas Cage that you're aware of that you are completely excited for, that you would promote to the heck? What's on your radar, Isaac? What are you looking forward to the most?
Oh, that's a great question. The biggest one that I'm looking forward to is he has been confirmed by Amazon and MGM Studios to be starring in his own Spider-Man Noir series. Amazon MGM is the one that will be distributing it. Sony obviously owns the property of Spider-Man Noir, so they will be involved in the production of that as well. But he played an absolutely perfect Spider-Man Noir, voiced, I should say.
Yes, voice acting.
In Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, which is my favorite movie of all time. I absolutely adore that movie. The fact that Nicolas Cage plays a minor role in it,
that's a cherry on top.
The icing on top of that movie. It's incredible. I did have a lot of questions when I heard that news is coming out, because how does it work with the difference from live action and animation? Obviously, he can voice that role really well, but I believe he is 61 years old right now.
Yeah, 61.
He looks it, like 100%. He's aging. So how does that translate to a spider-powered noir detective? I don't know. But I'm excited for it nonetheless. And they did in that announcement, they did say that he's playing like a retired noir detective. So this is going to be in his later years as Spider-Man Noir, probably looking back on a lot of the things that he did, and then maybe getting into a new caper, or however you want to say it. So that's
something from the past coming to bite him in the future. I'm looking forward to it too. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm part of me was also a little worried because Sony's live action projects have been pretty suspect.
Agree.
Continuing with Madam Web this year and Kraven later this fall, which looks like a pretty generic action movie to me.
Yeah, but I don't think anybody's going to be writing home about too much coming from Sony. But I also hope this is good.
Right. The fact that Amazon and MGM are involved is promising to me, because hopefully they can avoid the very Sony-esque poor decisions that are made in the production of a lot of those films. So who knows? We'll see. But I'm still excited to see it. Spider-Man Noir, again, one of my favorite characters in Into the Spider-Verse. So love that for him. He's in a movie later this year called The Surfer. I don't know much about that, but he is playing a retired surfer as well. And I think it's described as like a thriller. Man returns to his beachside hometown in Australia. He's humiliated in front of his teenage son by a local group of surfers who claim ownership over the secluded beach of his childhood. So he's going to have to fight to get his beach back, I guess.
I love the fact that I hope he tries an Australian accent.
That will be interesting.
As an Australian,
to see how he does that.
Notoriously one of the hardest to replicate well. So let's see if Nicolas has the chops to. But it sounds like a really good premise. I think for me, there's a couple that are on my radar for Nicolas Cage coming out. And the first of which is obviously Spider-Man Beyond the Spider-Verse, the last installment of that trilogy, seeing him as Spider-Noir again in the animated form. But he's going to play John Madden in the biopic called Madden, which that got some hot and cold remarks based on whether they think he can play that role as well. And I will admit, I haven't had much to do with John Madden other than playing the video games, obviously, but I feel like he can lean into any role that he sort of puts his mind to. And I think there's a lot of breadth of character for John Madden.
Yeah. John Madden is a very unique voice. And Nicolas Cage has a unique voice. The fact, the question is, can he kind of replicate that unique voice of John Madden's? Honestly, when I heard this news, I thought of a few different movies in his career that leads me to believe that I think he can probably pull it off. Number one is Army of One, which is a bonkers movie. The fact that this movie is based on a real true story is even more bonkers, but it's about a American guy who goes to Pakistan to try to hunt down Osama bin Laden himself.
Wow.
And he plays the titular character in that. And it is a very crazy, very quirky movie. Russell Brand plays God in that. So I mean, just hearing that, you're like, okay, yeah, this is a weird.
Yeah, it's going to be a trip.
It's going to be a trip. Exactly. But he has this like higher pitched tone of voice in that I'm like, you know what? I think he could probably tweak that a little bit. And, you know, Nicolas Cage, he loves the acting craft. So he's going to study that. He's going to do a lot of things, modifications to his voice to try to, you know, replicate that if that comes to pass. I think he will be fine. I think it is an interesting casting because there's definitely people out there that look the role more than Nicolas Cage, for sure. I mean, the iconic John Madden voice is going to be the thing that people are going to remember about this biopic. So we'll see if he can pull it off. It'll be interesting for sure.
I think, as you said before, and has said a few times during this interview, he's not afraid to take a risk. Playing John Madden, a very famous American sort of person in the NFL sphere, definitely a risk. And I'm looking forward to seeing if he can pull it off as well. The last thing that I'm looking forward to in terms of things that are coming up for Nicolas Cage is there has been rumors circulating that he will appear again as Johnny Blaze, aka Ghost Rider, in the new Secret Wars movie for the Avengers that's coming out. Have you heard any rumors about that, Isaac?
I have, and actually just had posted a review of Ghost Rider Spirit of Vengeance on our socials last week. And in that review, I mentioned Ryan Reynolds said this earlier after Deadpool and Wolverine came out, that he actually did talk to Nicolas Cage about reprising his role as Johnny Blaze, Ghost Rider, for Deadpool and Wolverine. It didn't work out. I mean, probably I would assume it's due to Cage's availability because of all of the junk that he's involved in.
Yeah.
But still, the fact that Ryan Reynolds straight up admitted that, I think is a very good sign that we're probably going to get Nicolas Cage's Ghost Rider in Secret Wars. Because, I mean, if you guys are fans of the Infinity Bros at all, this is like our bread and butter. Like, we love talking about the rumors that are floating around on the internet. One of our Infinity Bros, Mark, he's like, we call him the tinfoil hat distributor of the Infinity Bros universe. He's all about the conspiracy theories and what could be happening in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So, I mean, we've talked about this. Very good chance that he and many other characters come back for Secret Wars, which in the comics is this multiversal event where they basically bring all of the, you know, multiverses or universes together to one plane called Battle World. So, I mean, there's no limits on this one. We could see Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man. We can see Andrew Garfield's Spider-Man back again. You know, like every character that you can think of from the past could potentially be in Secret Wars. And like I said, the fact that Ryan Reynolds discussed this with him, I think is a very good chance that we'll see him in Secret Wars, which I'd love to all in on.
Yeah, I'd love to see it just to see that bike again. That transformation was fantastic. In the first Ghost Rider movie, when he's riding alongside Sam Elliott on the Ghost Rider horse.
Yeah.
That's in the brain. Like, that's locked in as a memory. It was a good piece of cinematography. Yeah.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
Good. Yeah, with that Western song in the background, and absolutely great. All right, let's move on now and leave our audience with your top movie from your letterbox from Nicolas Cage, my top movie, and then I also want to talk about, because you're a dad and I'm a dad, what would be an introductory movie that you would give for Nicolas Cage for your kids as well? Because he has done some voice roles, he has done some live action. What would you show kids, and also what's number one on your letterbox list? Mine, I'll start. Obviously, if you are listening to this and you want to join in on Isaac's Nicolas Cage marathon, my recommendation to you would definitely be, as I said before, Raising Arizona. Go and watch that movie. It was a really breathtaking performance, really nuanced, and just that comedy sort of slapstick vibe as well. It's a bag for everybody. So that's number one for me. What about yourself, Isaac?
I didn't bury the lead. I already said that my number one is National Treasure. And after starting this Nicolas Cage watch, I went back and rewatched it because I was like, how does this hold up among... obviously, I had very fond memories of it because I watched it all the time as a kid. But I look back on it and I'm like, maybe I had some, nostalgia clouded glasses. Like, I should go back, watch this again, see if it holds up. And it does. It's one of his best performances, I think. Ben Gates is one of my favorite roles of his, for sure.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned too, that the soundtrack is phenomenal for that film.
Exactly.
It really adds a huge boost to the film itself. Still my number one movie. And there probably is a little bit of nostalgia in that decision, but at the same time, I'm completely fine with that. So
You know what?
that's my number one, and it's also one that the kids can watch because that's a very clean, great family, like almost semi-action film. Got a lot of fun stuff in there that's great for the whole family.
Yeah, I agree. I think that would be a great entry point for any family. If your kids are younger, like mine's currently younger than yours at the moment, I would say. So probably like something like The Croods would be mine. Plays a great voice actor in The Croods as Grug, the father there. And, my son's already sort of watched that. And he's at the age now where he's getting the stamina to watch an entire movie through. So I'm on an exciting sort of path with him where I'm showing him the movies that are good to me, and obviously he can develop his own taste too. So that would be on the list for me as well.
We're big Croods fans in this household, and the second Croods film is actually probably better than the first one. So if you haven't watched that one, definitely check that one out as well. One more that I would recommend for like families, and this is probably more like for older kids, like into preteen years, but The Sorcerer's Apprentice is actually a Disney film that Nicolas Cage did, and it's actually really, really good. I watched it kind of like, it looks cheesy. Like you look at the front of it and like, this looks cheesy. It is cheesy, but it makes for a great family film. I was pleasantly surprised by how charming that movie was. Nicolas Cage is great in it. That's also along the family like level. That is right up there with A National Treasure, excuse me. I think those are two great films for like kids that are getting in. My oldest is 7, and we're just starting to watch like live action movies that my kids can sit and watch. We watched Pirates of the Caribbean a couple weeks ago. Great film. We started watching the Star Wars movie. Like all these films my kids are just starting to get into. So that's one that I would like show my kids, and I think that they would really, really enjoy.
Yeah, I agree. Like Nicholas played a Balthazar in that movie, who's an older sort of sorcerer mentoring Jay Baruchel, is it? The younger one?
I believe so, yeah.
Young Canadian actor, yeah. And it's just like a really good mix of magic and fantasy, and it gives off like Percy Jackson vibes to me as well. So if you're into that, then definitely go and check out The Sorcerer's Apprentice too. But yeah, I think we've got a really good list for our listeners here. So with that, Isaac, I think it's time to bid you farewell. And I want to thank you again for joining me here. I know you've got a busy schedule, but thank you for being part of the Fandom Portals journey. Everybody, you can find Isaac's details in the show notes below. You'll get his letterboxd down there. You'll get the Infinity Bros podcast. Make sure you go and follow. Also, look at their Instagram and TikTok. You will see Isaac appearing, reviewing his Nicolas Cage films as he is doing them. You can join the journey with him and go and watch some Nick Cage on the cinema. So again, Isaac, thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, dude. It has been an absolute blast and pleasure to be on.
I appreciate that, man. And we can have you on anytime. Love geeking out about this stuff. And I'm sure it won't be the last time we hear your voice on the Fandom Portals podcast.
Thank you.
All right. We'll see you later, guys.
Bye.